My name is Richard Clark. I'm the emergency manager for Bernalillo County. And as emergency manager, I got to give you the safety briefing, so we're all safe if things happen. So if for some reason we have to evacuate, the exits are here where we came in. There's also an exit through up here if you need to get out of the building. More than likely, if we have to exit, just follow the sheriff, because he'll be probably, so, and he'll lead us out. The other thing, just for your edification, up the stairs here are the restrooms if you need those as well. Please take advantage of the community center, because you know, we're here to support the community. One of the things we'd like to thank Park and Rec for giving us the community center for tonight's meeting and setting up everything, because they're an integral part of our overall operation. I'd like this time now to introduce some of our honored guests to give a few words. I'm happy to introduce this first speaker. He's been with the county for a long time, and I sat next to him side by side in our emergency operations center during Doghead Fire. And so I can tell you he's a great supporter of the county. And this is his last day officially in the county as commissioner. He's moving on to the state auditor. So it's my pleasure to introduce Commissioner Wayne Johnson. Sir.
Thank you very much. It's great to be here. And more than anything else, it's great that you're all here. I remember 8 years ago coming into one of my first fire meetings. It wasn't even my meeting. I was just attending as a candidate. And I think there was like 6 people in the room and about 20 staff. And they were typically, when I got into office, that's exactly what would happen. And unfortunately, at the time, we hadn't had a big fire out here in the East Mountains in a while. And everybody gets lulled into a sense of complacency. So I can't tell you how excited I am that you are here tonight, because this is one of those things that is very important. You live in a beautiful part of the country. You live in a beautiful part of this state, but it also has some downsides to it, and fire risk is one of them. And one of the reasons I'm here tonight, I could have just last night had my last meeting and, you know, wander off into the sunset, as they say. But the reason I'm here is because I think this is going to be a particularly difficult year. I think everybody knows that to be the case. And so your participation in this meeting, and more important than that, your willingness to get out and actually do the work to clear your defensible space, to create that ability for us to help you in your homes and get in there, is critical to your survival and the survival of your property and your animals. And being ready is one of those things that I don't think you can ever be ready enough, quite frankly. Now, I don't want to scare you, but one of the things I learned in the Doghead Fire is you don't want to be trying to figure out what to do in the heat of the moment. Panic is a terrible thing. And even some people do very well under stress. Other people don't do so well and just lock up during those stressful situations. I tell you, if you've already got everything together, you've got your go bag, you've created your defensible space, you're going to be in a great position to be able to evacuate, and we're going to be in a better position to be able to protect your property and your life, and not lose life in the process. Doghead Fire a couple years ago, we were kind of fortunate. We had some conditions that we had high moisture content in the grass and the fine fuels. So what we would see in that fire is it would hit the grasslands and stop. It's been so dry here, I don't believe that will be the case. And there's nothing that moves faster than a grass fire across a prairie. So I want to make sure that you're ready. You don't want to count on any kind of weather at this point to help you out. Be ready, get your go bags together, and learn from these folks. We've got a bunch of different agencies here. Sheriff's Department, our fire department. We've got Forest Service, we've got the Weather Service here. Go ask questions. They're experts in what they do, and they're very good at what they do. So I'm not going to talk for 4 hours simply because I've got 4 hours left in my term here at Bernalillo County. But thank you for coming. It has been an honor to serve you. It's been an honor to work with you, even through difficult circumstances like the Doghead Fire. Know that you've got very good people that are supporting you and who will be there when you need help. Thanks again.
Thank you, Commissioner Johnson. I'd like to take this opportunity now to introduce another great supporter of the county. He's been here during the Doghead Fire as well and supported you with officers. So it's my honor to introduce Bernalillo County Sheriff Manuel Gonzalez.
Good afternoon and welcome. I'd like to thank Commissioner Wayne Johnson for his service during the time we've had the honor to be able to work together. So thank you. Thank you, sir. Also, just want to let you know, since the Doghead Fire, one thing that I noticed and change also is the situational awareness of the citizens up here. And I realize that's why you're sitting here. And obviously with an emergency, that changes things. So we appreciate your involvement. If you see anything suspicious, please report it to our deputies. They're very responsive. They're very concerned about the things that go on here. Commander Josh Kingsbury's here. He's very informed and updated with the things that are going on around here. Since the fire, some of the things that have changed for us is the policies in our evacuations, also in the alert systems, and also being more prepared. And obviously, I think we have, if not the best air unit in the state, because we do service other areas in this state. We have the ability to fight fires also with that resource. So I'd like to give credit to Under Sheriff Korn because he's one of the pilots and he's really spearheaded that program. And I think we really owe him a round of applause for making it what it is today. So that being said, I'm not a very long-winded person, but I'd like to answer any questions if you have any down the road, and if you need anything from the sheriff's office, you have our support. And my captain out here will answer the questions, and we'll have a presentation for you. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Sheriff Gonzalez. Okay, so tonight what you're going to do is we're going to have some presentations from various speakers. So our first presentation is from hopefully our friend. This is the guy that's supposed to be out there helping us. They told us today that we were supposed to have some weather coming in and supposed to get some. The first we'd like to bring up is the National Weather Service, and he is a good friend of mine, and he's also a resident here of the East Mountains, so he does care about this area, and so he's always giving us alerts and telling us what's going on so that we can let you guys know what's happening. And so with that, I'd like to introduce Kerry Jones from the National Weather Service.
So, Rich, it actually did snow. So good evening, everyone. I'm going to adjust my microphone here. We are going to try and put the lights out. I know the slides, for the folks in the back, can you more or less make that out? Okay. So I have a slide set that I put together just for this program. I wanted to highlight the outlook, but I like what Commissioner Johnson said in terms of we're not going to let the weather get us out of our situation that we're in. It's dire straits with weather. So kind of going into this winter, we knew what? We knew that it was going to be a mild and dry. Expected to see a scene like we had here just recently. This is a series of photos that I've taken. This is up high in the Sandias. We had no snow at the end of last year. No snow at 10,000 feet. I've lived in this area since 1994. I suspect many of you for twice that or longer. It's probably, at least I'm guessing in the history of this room, the driest that it's been. Notwithstanding the snow that we've had here the last couple of weeks, but I will argue that the difference from this year to last year is pretty stark, and I think we all can certainly relate to that. I'm going to reference 2011. 2011 was our last big fire season, Los Conchas. Than we do now. And that photo, obviously we've added to that since the end of January, but not by much. So I want to put things in perspective, because one thing that probably is the most frustrating from our standpoint is the fact that we get a little bit of snow and memory fades. So if we take a look at the last roughly 12 months, this is New Mexico, this is statewide precipitation. So you look at this graph, and you see at the very top, that would be the record wettest going back 123 years. So for example, this would be, and it cuts off, but that's January of 2017 was one of the record wettest in the state. So less than a year ago. And as we go through the 12 months, you can see the ebbs and flows. You can see that we had a pretty good summer, especially August stands out there. September, October started off great, and then it pretty much fell off after October 5th. And I'll draw your attention to the 3 dots, November, December, and January. Basically in the 10 driest months that we've had on record for those respective months in 123 years of tracking it. So that's the precip. Here's the temperature graph. So again, this goes back to January of last year, only 2 months, and those months were May and August. Only 2 months out of the last 13 have been at or below average on temperatures. And if you kind of closely look, November, which is this month here, basically all of our warmest months have been probably in the top 15, top 20, statewide. So this is not just Albuquerque, this is all of our stations averaged across the state. So warm and dry. The outlook for the winter, that's pretty much what's played out. And so I want to kind of go into a little bit of detail. When we talk about the fire season, there's key factors in terms of the drought. It was mentioned earlier about fine fuels and kind of what we look at going forward into the spring and early summer. So let me kind of go through each one of these. When we talk about the drought, we're talking about the big picture, okay? We're talking about timbered areas, how the fuels are currently. We're going to talk about the fine fuel, the fine dead fuels, which is what carries fire. We'll talk about the kind of the setup going into this season and kind of what we look at for the actual season ahead. So this plot here kind of shows you drought trends going back to 2011. So this is a map that you may be familiar with. This is the drought monitor map. So anything that you see shaded in red would be severe or extreme or exceptional drought. And so I'll kind of just let your eyes kind of gaze at these maps. You can see we went into our period of real intense drought, 2011, 2012, 2013, and then you can see and some of these big fires, these are the big large fires, the huge fires, 2011, 2012, even 2013. But really since 2014, we haven't had major fires. Okay, so it's been a few years. But if we look at the current setup, and I'm going to compare current map, which is on the right, to the image on the left. The image on the left is the drought map as we went into the 2011 fire season. Now, keep in mind that our snow levels currently are less, much less than they were back in 2011. The image on the very bottom just kind of shows you a time series, but it's striking to us in the Weather Service and elsewhere that the setup that we had going into 2011 looks eerily similar to what we see currently. That is, you can see that currently we have about 2/3 of our state in severe or worse drought, about 78%. And you can see how it's really ramped up since October. So the big fires that we had, not only in 2011, we had big fires, as I said, that went into 2012 and 2013. And why do we talk about statewide trends? We have to think resources. if we get into a major, as we get into May and June, and resources become stretched because we have wildfires in Arizona, California, New Mexico, they become limited really quick. And so we have to think beyond the East Mountains. Yes, I reside here. My concern is high. But if we're thinking big long-term picture, it's a resource allocation as much as anything. So it's on us to prepare and get prepared. So the drought, the fine fuels. Send me your photos of grass that's up to your knees, right? We had a fire, was it yesterday, just west of Moriarty? The fine fuels, they're cured. They're ready to carry fire. The other issue is, as you go higher in elevation, typically when you get a good winter snowfall, that snow packs down the grasses. So by the time it melts off in May and early June, you're left with matted grass that doesn't carry fire as easily. We don't have that scenario. I mean, you can go up to close to 8,500 feet currently without hardly any snow. But in the lower elevations, it's the fine fuels. We had good carryover from our abundant monsoon rains that we had last year. I mentioned that August was wet and cool. So we have that carryover factor. We're going to be moving into our green up, especially as we get east of here. To what extent that green up is going to mitigate the fire threat remains to be seen. But as soil temperatures warm and we get a little bit of moisture in that top soil, the green up will help mitigate some areas. But the fine fuel setup is significant. So let's move into what we know, all right? Since October 5th, it's dry, it's warm. Our snowpack numbers are abysmal, okay? So as a meteorologist, you hear lots about high pressure, and yes, that's exactly what's happened. It's La Nina winter. Historically, we know that this is how it typically plays out in New Mexico. You have strong high pressure on the west coast. All the storms are going into the northwest and diving down. Occasionally, we get a system that comes through, like we've had the last couple weeks. But this map shows you snowpack across the west. Red is not good. So it's all about the storm track. And again, I want to compare 2011. That's February 20th, 2011 on the left. That's February 28th on the right. Again, keeping in mind that the 2011 fire season was a big one. In fact, I wasn't able to find a single basin in 2011, currently that's actually better than it was in 2011. Okay, so here's the geeky part, okay? I grew up in New Mexico. It's windy in the springtime, right? So we know April and May are the windy months. Our goals, when we look at the seasonal outlook, is trying to predict, well, how many of those real bad windy days are we going to have? Because it's the wind that's our enemy. Wind hastens the drying of fuels. Wind-driven fire. So these images are kind of a typical spring setup in New Mexico. So the image on the right is for temperature and then precip. That red line would be kind of a storm track. Close to us. But guess what? We're getting warmer by the day. Days are getting longer. And here in another 3 weeks, days are longer than nights. That all plays into it. So this is the normal pattern. What we think is going to play out is something like this. This is not all bad news, okay? Meaning that the pattern that we've been in, with some systems kind of digging out of the Rockies, bringing some moisture, we get a little bit of, a trace here, a hundredth here. But if we get that every 7 to 10 days, that adds a little bit of confidence that maybe we're not going to be just horribly dreadful in terms of the fire outlook. So the outlook is basically kind of signaling that at least eastern New Mexico, we get those fronts that come in from the east, may help supply our moisture. But more importantly, here's what the takeaway on this slide is the fact that we perhaps will not see a huge number of those windy days. The one thing in 2011, I don't know if anybody remembers, but we had wind events well into June, almost the end of June. June is typically not our windy month. It's April and May. Los Conchas was caused by a down power line due to high winds at the end of June. Highly anomalous. We don't see that repeating this year, fortunately, but it doesn't take much wind to cause problems. But I think the outlook is certainly somewhat promising, and even better, and I'll close out with this, is the monsoon. I will not predict the monsoon. We don't predict the monsoon. Okay, the monsoon is a season. It happens every year. Sometimes it's late, sometimes it's early. But one thing we will say is that there's indications. There's indications that we could have an early onset. And just mathematically, the earlier you get the monsoon in place, the greater chance you have for being wetter than average for the season. Can we hope for a wet monsoon and an early start? Certainly, we need to. But there's indications that that could actually play out. And the reason why is because when you have low snowpack in the southern Rockies and the Intermountain West, the monsoon circulation gets a jump start, we think. So that's kind of what maybe the models are catching on to. And we'll see how it plays out. In the meantime, there's your outlook for March and April. It's mostly red for all of New Mexico to include the East Mountains. This is significant wildland fire, greater than 100 acres. There's April and May. The entire state is now red. What do we know about April and May? That's our windy season. The only thing that we're hoping for is, as I said, fewer big-time wind events, and there's indications that that may play out. My last slide. As I mentioned, on the bottom, these are the precip outlooks. On the top is temperature. Notice that as we get into June and July, the brown over New Mexico goes away. So we have confidence, even at this, here in February, looking out towards June and July, that the monsoon may well arrive a little ahead of schedule and could be quite robust. We can hope. We can hope. But until then, now's the time to get ready for what's coming, and that's warmer temperatures, windy days, and fuels that are pretty much ready to go. So that's my email address. Happy to take additional questions or feedback. Thank you.
Thank you, Kerry. And again, like he said, he'll be over at his table to ask him questions and everything on that. And Kerry's a great partner when it comes to that. We call him all the time just to see what's going on, to make sure that we're a bit ahead of the weather, so we can alert you guys as well if there's thunderstorms and stuff coming in. So another great partner that we have here tonight is Sandia National Forest. Brent Davidson is going to come up and give us an update on what they've been doing and to help kind of do some clearing of the area.
Hey, good evening. Brent Davidson. I'm the Fire Management Officer for the Sandia Ranger District, just right around the corner here. So what I want to touch on tonight is basically what's up there, the wildland and prescribed fire benefits and outcomes. And what I want to touch on is just kind of what we're doing ahead of seasons like we have in front of us right now with our prescribed fire programs, and what some of the wildfires that we have actually out there in the woods are doing to benefit conditions out there and improve what we have to deal with. So mostly have a lot of pictures here to touch on. 250 slides or so. You guys got a few hours, right? All right. No, not too many. I'll try to keep it a broad-based overview and show you kind of what we've been doing for the last year or so out there. So the first thing I want to touch on is just some of our pile burning. So we do fuels treatments. We go in, we thin areas, we remove some material, we masticate some material, we pile sip some material, we slash some material. And then we have to go out and burn those areas. So the first thing we did, this is from last week actually, at the Sulphur Project area, which is just up off the Crest Highway, and the Sulphur and Cienega picnic areas. So this is kind of a small picture. They'll get bigger, I promise. But so this is what it looked like last week when we decided we had a good opportunity to go out there and reduce that fuel loading with the piles. Another picture of some of the piles there with the snow on them. And then this is kind of a few of those piles off from the wreck sites when they're being burned, and some of the smoke production that's involved in that. And smoke's a big factor because we want to lessen the impacts as much as possible. Pretty low smoke impact on there. It was a really cloudy day, so you may not even have seen it if you were in the area. Some closer pictures there of just the pile burning projects. So, multiple stages as we go through and reduce the fuels out there. This same area has, we do broadcast burning in it as well as some of the pile burning. So that was last week up off the highway, so we're getting ready to try to reduce some of that fuel loading up there. And then moving into that, this is a project that's been going on for quite a while around here, and we were able to implement 467 acres of broadcast burning in the David Canyon area. A really important area for us because it is adjacent to the Kirtland Air Force Base land there, and that land hasn't been treated, so it's a drastic difference across the fence there between that condition and then what we have in David Canyon. Quite a few pictures in here, some kind of smoke production on like a moderate level right there on one of the days that we burned this fall in November. A picture of some of the folks getting ready in the morning, waiting for the conditions to be favorable for us to start our ignitions. And then this is an example of, there's a variable amount of fuel loading out there. So this is one of the lighter sections of fuel loading in the David Canyon area. And that's what it looks like when we're actually burning that material. And this is a mastication unit out there. So it's burning some of the finer fuels as well as some of the mastication that's out. Same kind of picture, different area, light fuel loading, light smoke production. And then as we progress through these pictures, you'll see that the fuel loading and some of the fire intensity kind of increases with different areas in the same units. So you'll see that one of the trails there, it's one of our holding features for that unit we were burning that day. A little bit more smoke and fire, and then it kind of increases from there. A little bit more needle cast, a unit that hasn't been burned in a long time. But you can still see that there's, it's not getting into the crowns of the trees throughout the whole unit. It's moving across the ground, very low scorch heights, and pretty moderate fire behavior. And then a little bit slope involved, a little bit more slash on the ground, so a little bit more smoke production, a little bit more smoke and flames. And it just kind of increases throughout these slides. Drastically more smoke there, but as we create some heat, we create some smoke, and it lifts and it kind of gets out of the area as well. A road out there, that's another one of our control features. Nice ponderosa pine stand. And then just a few more of those. So this is kind of what we're going for. We're trying to get rid of the heavier fuels that are out there to a degree. Some residual fuels out there are fine. It's good for the habitat and the wildlife. And then, it's just kind of reducing everything from the fine needles to the bigger logs. Just more pictures of the same. And then this is the result. This is what we're looking for in the end. It burned where there was available fuels under the conditions. It didn't where there was not. And those grasses had some green bases to them, and it didn't burn through them. But it's a nutrient reset. It got rid of a lot of the fuel loading, and just a good product there, kind of a mosaic pattern, not throughout. More of the same. You can see some of the white marks there where the heavier fuels are on the ground, and they actually consumed all the way to the white ash. And then some of the areas that had some more fuel loading to them, they look more like that, and they've consumed all the way down, a little bit hotter. But as you can see, all the trees are still standing and doing good. Just more of the same as we move through the hillsides with the slopes, a little bit more severe, or not severe, but a little bit more widespread. And if I'll go back to that. So, the importance of these projects is, along with some of the wildfires that are out there and the pile burns and everything, is, there's future wildfire risk mitigation is a large portion of it. So if we have a fire somewhere in that area this year and it burns into these units, it doesn't have a whole lot to consume. It still has the overstory and things like that it can burn through, but the success of firefighters being able to engage and suppress a fire if they need to in a unit like this is exponentially higher than it was if it was untreated. It's also, it's ecosystem just reset, and it's also just habitat improvement. There's a lot of things that like to go in there while we're burning. You'll get raptors and things like that actually use the smoke. It drives out, mice and things like that, and the raptors will come in and kind of take that opportunity to get a good meal out of it. Some of the deer and things like that come and roll around in the hot ash and actually eat some of the ash and things like that. So it's an important part of the habitat restoration also. The last part that I want to talk about here is the North Crest Fire from last year in July, which I'm sure everybody's familiar with or saw the smoke from, or the road closures and things like that we had. It was July 6th of last year, which is right around the time of our typical monsoon season starting. It was a lightning-caused wildfire right up to just north, about a half mile north of the communication site up there along the North Crest Trail. So lightning strike, and there's a few slides here of what it looked like from the air last year whenever that fire started. I think this is probably at a couple acres, and so it's a good representation of how deceiving the smoke can be sometimes. Because I know, talking to a bunch of people who are even down in the city, that they could see the flames and the smoke from this fire, and it sounds like it looked pretty impressive. So we're talking about 1.5 acres, 2 acres at this point, somewhere like that. There's just some other viewpoints of it. You can see the Crest Highway in the background, the sheer cliff bands along the west face. These are all taken within the same maybe 20 or 30 minutes. A little bit of growth in there, and you can see the terrain influence where there's 2 predominant smoke columns coming up where it's kind of just following the terrain. It wasn't very windy yet. It was pretty early in the morning. Grown a little bit at this point, and then just some more vantage points from there. And then, the larger volumes of smoke are produced by, groups of maybe 4 or 5 trees torching out at one time is kind of what you're seeing in those pictures. A little closer up view of that. And then looking from the communication site back to the north, from the northwest side there. So, and then this gives you perspective from the west side looking up at where that fire was. So it's just right over the top of the ridge right there. And then moving closer to the fire area. So just want to, a lot of people are probably really familiar with this, but the condition of the forest up there and what it looks like, and compared to after the fires burned through it. And I think it's some pretty impressive pictures of the difference within a week or two of the fire. So this is along the North Crest Trail. And if you can pick it out, just at the bottom right-hand corner of the screen is actually a piece of hand line from the suppression efforts on the fire up there. So that's looking north along the Crest Trail there. And you can see a lot of material that's stacked on the side of the trail. Some of that is due to just keeping the trail open from windfall and things falling over. And some of it's from some of the suppression efforts. Some of it's just some of the natural materials that are there. And then just a few more of that. This is what it looked like after it burned through a portion of it. And you can see that it didn't even consume all the material. There's still some of the larger material there. Just pictures of post-fire. Some of it was ground fire, and some of it was a little more severe. So you can see how it did torch out some of the trees entirely, and some blew a little bit of a hole, if you will, in the canopy there. And then this is a picture that I like to share. This is on the line looking into the forest where it hasn't burned. This is what it looks like before the fire had come in there, and then turned around and took a picture the opposite side of it where the fire had come through. and that's what it looks like. There's some saw marks and cuts where some trees were removed, but a lot of that's just what the fire did as it burned through there to kind of reset the ecosystem. Couple really amazing pictures just from the top, just for eye candy there at the end. But yeah, beautiful, beautiful views from up there on top, and you can see some of the residual smoke. And then that was the first night there, I think, of the fire. So these are pictures of the regrowth already, about a month or so after. And a little moth there and some wildlife footprints. And then just already the returning of plant life with the rains. Future projects, come back and talk to me after this. I can answer any questions about what's going on and the status of everything that we're doing right now. And I didn't take that picture, I stole it, but it's really pretty. So yeah, come talk to us afterward. Be happy to answer anything that you have. And thanks for showing up tonight.
Thanks a lot, Brent. And, you know, just to reiterate some of his stuff is fire is good when they do it because it helps to rejuvenate the forest and bring them back. And so, you know, that's one of the things that we just need to take into consideration too. So great work that they're doing. Our next speaker to talk about, you going? Okay. Talk about fire adaptive communities and wildland fire response capabilities within Bernalillo County. I'd like to introduce Lieutenant Susan Powers from the Bernalillo County Fire Department.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Lieutenant Susan Powers with Bernalillo County Fire. I'm the Wildland Fire Coordinator. We're running a little long, so I'm going to move a little quicker than I had originally planned. Things we're going to discuss today, the things you can do now before the fire to help prepare yourself and your property. And when a fire happens, things that your two basic options, either stay in shelter in place or evacuate, and what the fire department's actions are going to be at that time. This is a Google Maps image of a local neighborhood, and our big concern is not the same area as the Forest Service. They control their Forest Service property. Our concern is all these houses that are mixed in the natural environment. So when we talk about fires, there's a couple of basics about how fire moves. Okay? It can move through conduction, which is direct heat transfer from one object to another, convection, the movement of hot air and gases, or through radiation, like the sun heats the earth or gives us a sunburn. And there are three things that contribute to where this fire is going to go. The fuels, what kind and how many, the weather, how hot or dry it is, and particularly the wind, and the topography or the shape of the ground. Fire likes to move uphill very quickly, it moves downhill a little more slowly. So if you combine all those things and look at your house, it's a good starting point for an assessment. When we're looking at houses, we use the term defensible space. It's the area we want to protect around your house. Okay? The more vegetation there is, the more likely it is to burn. Bigger fires equals more heat, more damage to the structures. This is not all about clear-cutting the forest. We have no desire to do that. And we understand that most people live out here at least partially for the beautiful trees that we have. However, those trees in the event of a fire also pose significant risks to our houses. The basic concept we're looking for is the three main zones. From the edge of the house, literally at the wall, out to about 5 feet. We want nothing in that area that can burn. Ideally, this would be paved with concrete if I had my way, but that's pretty expensive, although it's very easy to maintain once it's there. Moving out from there, we have the lean, green, and clean zone. Any plants that are there need to be trimmed and well watered to keep them lean and green. And we pick up all the debris that the forest likes to leave for us, the pine needles, the leaves, any dead grasses, things like that get picked up, because dead fuels burn far more easily than live, well-watered fuels. Moving out from 30 feet on out to the edge of your property, or at least 100 feet, maybe further if you're going downhill, we want to start reducing the amount of fuels. We're going to not taking out every tree, but thinning them out so that there's some daylight between them, preferably 15 to 20 feet, and taking the lower branches off. Depending on the guidelines you're looking at, some say up to 8 feet, some say 4 to 6 feet, but anything is better than right next to the ground. And as we move further and further out, we let it return to a more natural state. Another very important concept is how fire resistant is the house itself. Okay? There are some things we can do fairly quickly and inexpensively that will contribute to fire staying out of the house. And the number one thing we can do is to close off all those little openings. Your attic vents, little spaces under the porch, things like that. Window screening is great, particularly aluminum window screening, so that any embers that come in contact with them can't get inside the house and it can't melt the screen itself. For houses that are already built, it's a little more expensive to retrofit, to put on a pitched metal roof and to redo the siding into either aluminum siding or stucco, but it's far more fire resistant than clapboard or other natural materials. Concrete or gravel walkways right around the house, again, limiting that combustion right next to the house. And big, beautiful decks are a great way to watch the sunrise or sunset, depending on how your property is situated. But synthetic decks are more resistant to burning than natural. If you do have natural decking, it needs to be maintained just like anything else. And be sure and clean out all those gutters and the little corners around the house where leaves and other debris tends to be deposited by the wind. This is from the Waldo Canyon fire in 2013 in Colorado. 2012 in Colorado Springs. And what we're seeing here, obviously, is a neighborhood with a bunch of damaged houses. But in particular, I would like to point out that most of these bands of trees in between the houses are still green. In densely packed neighborhoods, what happens frequently is once the first house ignites, the embers from that house are what carries the fire to the next house. It's no longer a wildland fire. It's a similar concept to what happened in the big cities back east around the turn of the last century when you have fire spreading from building to building. Because you can see there's still a lot of green foliage in between those destroyed structures. So when a fire happens, what are your options? Things to consider. How well prepared are you? Have you thinned your property? Have you created that good defensible space, closed off the openings to your home, the vents, removed the combustible materials off your deck, things like that? Have you prepared yourself to evacuate? Do you have a kit that's ready to go? Do you have a plan for your family members? Do they know how to contact you? If in an evacuation area the power is frequently shut off for firefighter safety so that we don't have to worry about live power lines coming down. If your house is without power for a week or two, how will that affect you? Do you have a plan for your pets? Where are they going to go? Including your livestock. A lot of folks out here have horses, cattle, chicken, various other animals. They need to go somewhere too. And the big one is, how much time do we have? Where did this fire start? In 2016, the Doghead Fire, most of the folks in this room probably didn't live right next to that fire. They had time to get out. The fires in California this winter, in Sonoma County, when I was out there, that fire started at, I believe, 4:30 in the afternoon, and by midnight it had blown up a few thousand acres and taken out several homes. Those people didn't have any time to evacuate. In the event of mandatory evacuations, well, I'll let the sheriff's officers talk about mandatory evacuations. But if there are mandatory evacuations in place, that's for your safety as well as ours, so that when we do go into the area for fire activities, we don't have other vehicles on the road, and we don't have to worry about going and checking door to door again to make sure that nobody's there, and we can focus our energy where it can be most productive on reducing the fire, which will, in the end, makes everybody safer. When we respond to a fire, life safety is always our highest priority, yours and ours. If you have the option to shelter in place, if the fire is small and can be controlled quickly, fire department personnel nearby will probably let you know, stay home, we'll take care of this, and if something changes, we'll let you know. If there's limited risk to life and property. If this is a situation that's going to take a while, a few days, a few weeks, potentially even a month to take care of, evacuation is probably your best bet. And ultimately, this picture is our goal. This comes from Fire Adapted Communities Learning Network. I'd be happy to provide you all with a lot more information about them. Just come see me after the presentations. I'll be in the back. Are there any questions?
Thank you, Lieutenant Powers. The next speaker we're going to have is from the Bernalillo County Sheriff's Department. My microphone went out, but that's okay. I can talk loud. From Bernalillo County Sheriff's Department. Anybody here for remember Josh Campos? Anybody know Josh Campos from the Sheriff's Department? Okay. Well, he was the area commander out here during Doghead Fire and did a great job. And I think it must be a prerequisite to be a Josh to be part of in this area. I'm not sure. And so I'd like to introduce a good friend of mine as well, Josh Kingsbury, Captain Josh Kingsbury, who happens to be the area commander here in the East Mountains, and to give us a few words. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Rich. While they're trying to get this PowerPoint up and going, I would like to thank you all for taking time out of your schedules to come out here and sit with us tonight and get some information. I'd also like to thank our partners in public safety for being out here and setting up their information stations so that you guys have access to some of the best information that's going to work for you in the case of a wildfire, in the probability of a wildfire, because basically the type of season that we're having, it's not a matter of if it happens, it's a matter of when it happens, and we'd like to all be prepared. I'm not super good at talking off slides, so I'll put these things up, but I'm probably just going to jibber jabber. I apologize. There's no pictures in there. Photos of cops knocking on doors to ask you to pack up and leave aren't incredibly exciting, so I left them out. Our priorities, similar to the fire department, our primary duty in the case of a wildfire event is the preservation of life. To a lesser extent, preservation of property, including your animals and your livestock. But please understand that the Sheriff's Department is not equipped to deal with livestock. So if you do have livestock, you do have animals, please consider that and make preparations, like the lieutenant from the fire said, to have those things taken care of, because as an organization, we're not going to be very equipped to help you out with that. And besides, our primary concern is going to be your safety and your family safety. So all those extra things that a lot of the people who choose to live in the mountains and live this rural lifestyle have, you need to also put into place plans of action to take care of those things in the case that a wildfire breaks out. So what can you expect from the Sheriff's Department in the event of an evacuation? Well, we're going to work closely with the fire department, with the fire authorities, to determine exactly what their needs are in regards to fighting the fire. And we're also going to work with the fire department to determine if there are any areas that are identified as high priority safety issues that need to be evacuated. In the case that we do need to perform evacuations, and I'll talk a little bit about that here in a second, we'll identify highest need first and work towards the lowest need. Evacuation is always going to be our last resort. Separating you from your property is not something that that should be taken lightly, and we don't. But in the case that evacuations are put into effect, it's going to be the Sheriff's Department responsibility to try to effect those as best we can. Let's move to the next one. So there are several different ways that we as a department, that the county can contact you should the need for evacuations arise. Our best way to handle evacuations is to make personal contact. We would like to optimally come to your door, knock on your door, say, hey, there are evacuation orders in effect, probably in your best interest to pack up your stuff and go. And then we're going to write down your name, your address, the number of people that were at the house, and we're going to document all that stuff and include that in our documentation to be able to know where we've been and who we have asked to move on out. That's not always possible due to either the geography or the scope of the fire or lack of manpower. Ideally, we'd like to mobilize as many people as possible, but our resources may not be the best in order to get a massive face-to-face evacuation accomplished. So there's several other ways that we can do that as well. You can be contacted by landline phone with an automated message, okay? In conjunction with our communications department, we can blast messages out to specific areas that are under an evacuation warning, evacuation advisement. This generally only works in the case of a landline phone. However, there are options to get into programs that can take those same warnings and put them to your mobile devices or put them to your voice over internet phones if that's what you're using, and those informations will be presented to you later, and there are stations that will be set up here so that you can register for those systems as well. We as the Sheriff's Department also have begun using social media as kind of a broad-based public awareness network. So if you follow us on Facebook, you follow us on Twitter, you follow us on Snapchat, that same information that we're putting out also goes over social media. So that stuff is available to you too. If you don't follow us, heck, you probably should. You can ignore all the fluffy stuff if you want to, but we will definitely utilize social media to push out important information in the case of a fire event. The emergency alert system, I'm not super familiar with how that works, although I do know that there are several hoops that need to be jumped through to get that thing up and going, so it might not be the most timely system. But that is also another way that we can use to notify you that there is an evacuation in place. So please understand that when we talk about evacuations and the incident command of a fire event has determined that evacuations are necessary, we as a department are going to try as best we can to get out there and get that information to you. Please understand, we can't force you to leave your house. We're going to come to your house, we're going to knock on your door, we're going to make contact, or you're going to get that email blast, or you're going to get that phone blast, and it's going to advise you that the neighborhood you live in is under an evacuation order. Nobody can force you to leave your house. But please understand, if people are coming to your door and knocking on your door and saying, hey, there's an evacuation order, if you haven't noticed there's a fire, it's moving this way, it's going to be in your best interest to leave. It is in your best interest to leave. If you tell us no, we're going to move on to the next house, please understand that we cannot guarantee your safety after that evacuation order has been tried to put into effect. Once an area that has been identified for evacuation has been properly notified, that may be the last contact you have with law enforcement, with fire, until that event comes to a conclusion. Now, maybe they put it out and everything's cool, which would be great. Maybe the fire runs through there, burns the place to the ground. That would be bad. It would be worse if you were stuck in it. So please, from my perspective, if evacuation orders have been put into effect, it is in your best interest to get your stuff and go, because it's not a matter of if the fire is coming this way. There's a high probability it is, and your safety and the safety of your families are definitely in jeopardy. So please consider that. I know that I think the lieutenant touched on that, on the go bag. If you don't, having a go bag ready to go in the case of an evacuation that you want to get out quickly is ideal. You want to consider the fact that you may not be able to access your property for some time. Your property may be destroyed along with everything in it. So having items that you need to sustain yourself for at least a few days, if not longer in the cases of medications or other personal concerns that you have, you might think about getting these things together in a kit and keeping it ready to go in the case that a fire breaks out and evacuations are ordered. There is a great list of things to consider, because there are a lot of things to consider at ready.gov. They have probably a 50-item list of things that you might think about including in that bag in the case that an evacuation is put into effect. Again, though, please understand, there is no guarantee of your safety in the case that an evacuation is ordered. We're going to try to get you out of there. If you choose to stay, great. Not good, not great. You can, but please understand, there is no guarantee that you're coming out of there alive. And I don't know how to say it any more basic than that. So the next time we go in there, it may not be a rescue effort, it may be a recovery. And the difference between rescue and recovery is rescue, you're alive; recovery, we're looking through remains. Not a good thing. So in the case that evacuation order is put into effect, deputies will evacuate the areas and we will establish a perimeter based upon the needs of fire command. What that means is once you're out, you're not getting back in until fire decides that it's safe enough for you to come back in. That may be a few days. It may be a week, maybe a couple weeks. Take that into consideration. Have a go bag ready to go with your necessary supplies. We will transmit as much information as we can as far as locations of shelters and avenues of getting out of the areas that you need to get out of. But please understand, once you're out, you're not coming back in, maybe for some time. Plan for that. And then once everybody's out, we as a department, to the best of our ability, will try to patrol the areas that we have evacuated as much as possible. When it's not on fire and we can get in there, we try to minimize the fact that property crime sometimes occurs during these times when the areas are abandoned. And we will do our best to keep patrols going on in those areas and try to minimize any sort of looting or property crimes against what you guys own that's inside these areas. And I'll save questions for later. I'll be standing over here next to the county table following the presentation. If anybody has any questions, feel free to let me know. I thank you for your time, and I think it's a great idea that you guys are all out here. Thanks.
Thank you, Kevin Kingsbury. I just want to ask a quick question. I've got some slides that I'm going to be bringing up and try to be brief, but let me see by show of hands, how many people have a Go Kit? Okay. How many people know what a Go Kit is? We've talked about that, okay? All right. So I just want to make sure, how many people have a Go Kit for their pets? Okay, because they're important too, right? They're part of my family, they're part of everybody's family, and so we want to make sure that we have that Go Kit and it's ready to go. And the thing about it is that some of the things that we want to consider in that Go Kit, we want to talk a little bit about those Go Kits is prescriptions. Do you have a copy of your prescriptions in that Go Kit? So if you leave and you have to go and you have to get prescriptions because you're in a shelter, or you have to, you're not sure what the medications are you're taking, having a copy of those prescriptions in there is great. Other important documentation, because again, like everybody's been talking about, if an area comes through and we have to do an evacuation, you may not be able to get back there, and some of your important documentation may be destroyed. So, it's good to have that available, or at least someplace where you can retrieve it. Several years ago, my brother-in-law, for some reason, they spelled his name wrong on his birth certificate, and it took forever for him to get that corrected. I need to go to Santa Fe and jumping through a lot of hoops. So if you're trying to recreate some of this documentation, I can tell you it's not going to happen overnight. And if you're relying on that to get benefits and those kind of things, you're going to be probably behind the curve on that if you don't have some of those documentations saved. Some of the other stuff we talk about, food for the pets. Because remember, it's a traumatic experience for those pets. And we have our animal services over here, and they're going to talk to you a little bit about, when you go around there, about registering your pets, registering your livestock, and how important it is. Can you, can you as a person, can you adopt, or not adopt, but bring in other people's pets into your area or their livestock? Can you handle that during a disaster if somebody else has to evacuate? And so those are some things that Pat's going to talk about when you go over and talk to him a little bit. Some of the other things is that cell phones. It's the wave of the future. I went out and bought one of those portable batteries where you can plug in, because in a lot of cases, if you look around the room here, this is one of your shelters. There's not a lot of plug-ins on the wall, and sometimes it's first come, first serve. Whoever gets their bed next to that plug-in gets that charger, right? And so you may be without that. So invest in some of those kind of things. And if you have if you need some ideas on what to go into Go Kits, if you go to bernco.gov under emergency management, that's BERNCO.gov. You can go in there and get ideas on how to put Go Kits together. What are good ideas to put in those Go Kits as well. One of the things too is that, do you have an evacuation plan in your house? And if you got little ones running around, do they know how to get out of the house and where to meet? Because in a lot of cases, especially if there's a lot of smoke in the area, trying to get out of that house and trying to get to a location so you can have accountability of that. Do you have a call list of, if you're evacuating, do you have family members that you're calling? Because that's one of the first things, or one of the things we get a lot of calls in the Emergency Operations Center is, hey, I know there's a fire in the area. I can't get a hold of my relatives. Do you know where they are? And in a lot of cases, we don't. Because they may be in a shelter, and if you decided not to go to a shelter and gone to stay at a friend's house, we don't know that information. And so, for the benefit of your family, it's good that you have an alert notification system together, or tell them, hey, if I have to evacuate from here, I'm going here. That way, they at least know how to go get there. Because sometimes in disasters, cell phones go down as well, and so you may not be able to get out on the cell phone area. And so, make sure to take that into consideration, because evacuations and fires can be just as stressful on your family as it is on you. And so, especially not knowing where they are is something really stressful. Know where the routes are, evacuation. And I know that Captain Kingsbury talked about routes and these different types of things. One of the things we're working on trying to develop for the East Mountain is an evacuation plan. It may not specifically address routes that are coming out of here, because some of those depend on the fire, but it'll address certain things like, okay, what happens during an evacuation? What are some of the things you need to look for? Those kind of things. And so we're going to work with you in trying to put that together, because I know that we've had some concerns and people have asked about those. And so we're trying to put together an evacuation plan for this area. Who knows their neighbors? Who knows their neighbors if they have access and functional needs? Can they get out on their own, or are they stuck there because they don't have their provider there with a wheelchair accessible vehicle? Know that if they need help, that you can tell us that they need help, and so we can get them out of there. And this not only goes for wildfires, but this goes for like winter storms. What if you're snowed into your area and you can't get food or fuel and so forth? Know who your neighbors are. Be able to help them, and if they don't have the capability of helping themselves, make sure we know about that. Make sure the Sheriff's Department knows about that, the Fire Department knows about that, because that way we can assist them and help them as well. Because we don't want to leave them out there just by themselves. Because I told the county manager the other day that I never, ever, ever in Bernalillo County want to see a picture of a retirement center or something like that where we've got people in wheelchairs sitting in there that have died because of the heat or whatever it may be in our county. We will never, ever have that in this county as long as I'm here, because that is something that we cannot accept, we cannot stand for. And so make sure that you know who those neighbors are so that we can know who they are and we can be able to help you to help them. Here's some of the locations of the shelter. Anybody been in one of our shelters? It's kind of like the Hilton, right? No, it's not. So remember too, if you're been told to evacuate and you're going to come to one of our shelters, we're going to give you just the minimum convenience. We're going to give you a cot. We're going to give you a pillow. It's probably about this big. Okay. We're going to give you this old scratchy wool blanket, and we're going to give you maybe a personal hygiene kit if you weren't able to bring it with you. Okay. And so try to remember in that Go Kit to bring some of that comfort at home, the comfort from home, that another pillow. If you have a pillow that you can only sleep on, bring that. If you're on a CPAP machine like me, my wife says, bring that, please, because if I'm in a shelter, I'll probably be sitting out in the parking lot in my cot if I snore too loud in the rest of the population, okay? Because if you look at this area here, this is going to be where you set up cots. And so it's not as if you have dividers and separate rooms and all that stuff. And so make sure that you bring that type of stuff that so you can be good stewards of things. The other thing to remember is that a lot of our centers, based upon the Doghood fire, we were able to train a lot of our community center staff and the staff of Bernalillo County to run these shelters. The Red Cross has come in and gave us great training, because in a lot of cases, depending upon how big the situation is, we may not be able to have the Red Cross come in and open shelters. So now our county staff is trained to do it the right way, and I can tell you that if you come to one of our shelters, you'll be well taken care of. We talked about meals. We do provide 3 meals a day. You're not getting lobster and steak, okay? You know, you're probably going to get a sandwich, hopefully, chips, that kind of stuff. So, again, if you have any special dietary needs, those are the things, too, when you're registering in those shelters that you need to think about. We've got a great organization back there, and I can tell you that it's the Baptist Relief Organization. They're the ones that come in and help cook and provide meals. I remember during the Doghead Fire, I came down here to this community center, and all of a sudden there's these people running around in these yellow shirts, and I thought, who are these people? And it was that great organization. And they came in, and as part of their job, they volunteered to do it, and they served meals for the people in the center. And so again, you'll have that available as well. Now, again, like I said, it's not going to be steak and lobster, so just be prepared for that. Some of the other things that we have is that we do have shelter traders throughout the county, so we will be able to set up shelters as much as we need to when we need to. Let's talk about service animals and animals in the shelter. Okay. We want to make sure that that animals are taken care of, and so typically next to a shelter, we'll have an animal shelter set up where you can bring in your pets and you can check them in. And why do we set it up next to the shelter? So that you can go out there and help attend to that animal, because they're just as terrified and scared as you are that things are happening, because they're around other animals and maybe they're not used to that. They're around other people. They're having to leave and see the fire and the smoke. And so we want you to be able to go out there and take them on walks, calm them down, and feed them, and help us to take care of them, because they're just as traumatized as you are. And so make sure that that you know that. And in a lot of cases, unless it's a service animal, they won't be allowed in the shelter. And so that's why we have a shelter set up next to here, is to make sure that we can accommodate them as well. Livestock. We've got some great people in the animal services that will take care of livestock. One of the things that I know Pat is going to have you do is that if you're willing to trailer and have trailers that you can help your neighbors to evacuate livestock, let us know so we can call upon you. Again, if you have places where we can keep livestock, if we have to evacuate areas and you're willing to do that, let us know and get your name on that list. But we do use areas such as our surrounding counties to take care of animals if we have to, especially livestock, if we have to evacuate them. And we also have used the state fairgrounds as well. But remember, when you bring your animals to the shelter, you need to also make sure that they've had their proper immunization, because if they don't have their proper immunization, we may have to immunize them again, because we just don't know, and we don't want to get the other animals around there in the shelter sick. And so those are the things to think about as well when you're taking care of that pet and that go kid, is do they have their proper shot records and their immunizations as well. The last thing I have is talking about social media. We talked about alerting systems and social media and all those things. How many people are signed up for Nixle? Anybody heard of that, Nixle? Okay. It's an alerting system that we use, and that message comes out of my office for the county to alert you on different things that may happen, evacuations and those things. We're not going to tell you about yard sales and those things, because that's not what it's for. It's about letting you know if there's something happening in an emergency, okay? How many people are signed up for an alerting system from the 911 center? So if something happened, how many people could get alerted on their phone? Okay. Well, some of the things that we're going to do here as well is we actually have a place for you to sign up and opt in with your cell phones and your voice over IP phones to sign in, and you'll be able to do that at a table over there. But Nixle is a way that you can get alerts as well on things that are happening. We send out alerts that if we have road closures and law enforcement activity in this area, so you won't go there, or where to evacuate and where the shelters are going to be. So please, the more educated you are, the more knowledgeable you are on what's happening, then if you feel better in a disaster. And so we ask for you to sign up for those type of alerts that we can.